One of the things that we're concerned with is building a resilient community following a disaster, natural or otherwise. So when we look at it, we think of if you want, the 5 R's that build a resilient community. The first one is in the event of any kind of disaster, whether it's small or large, you are basically talking about first is relief work, and that has to do with the basics of food, clothing, and shelter, plus actually other things like money and medicines. And that's usually the first step in any kind of recovery effort. After we look at relief, then we're concerned about intermediate and immediate reconstruction. People are concerned about rebuilding their lives and their homes and their livelihoods, and that's what reconstruction entails. The third element is rehabilitation, and rehabilitation here has taken up a more interesting component, which is human rehabilitation. People need to rebuild their lives, they need to feel better, they need to feel psychologically safe, especially those who might have lost their loved ones, how children might be traumatized, and how they can rebuild their education and rebuild their livelihoods. After that, the next R is what we'd call risk assessment and mitigation. And this is not just financial, but we are concerned with things like, for example, if there's an area that is flooded, if the floods last for a long time, if an area has floods for more than a week, then you have a lot of waterborne diseases. So you want to mitigate those kinds of physical risks and medical risks. And that becomes important in terms of building a resilient community so that they can prepare for it the next time. Again, using the example of floods, it's important also to find out whether the relief operations the next time it happens will require, for example, if a flood area is 1 meter, then you can use Army half trucks and 6x6s. If it's 2 or 3 meters, then you need boats. So that's important as part of risk mitigation and assessment. And then finally, you've got recovery. And this is where you're talking about rebuilding entire communities. If you add those 5 R's, relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction, risk assessment and mitigation, and recovery, then you have a resilient community. The role of business is to provide options so that communities can rebuild themselves and become resilient. Businesses can look at a community and say, what are the things that we can do differently in terms of energy, in terms of facilities, so that the community becomes more resilient. Because one of the things that we assume for a resilient community is that there will be another R, a recurrence of an event. So I think that the role of business is actually part of providing options as well as contingency planning in terms of helping communities, because you're going to assume that this will happen a second time. There will be a recurrence. So I think there is a role for business in working on these essential elements that we had previously mentioned.